Diane here from Backroad Buddies, and the video we want to share with you today is about our EKKO purchase process. Now, purchasing an RV is a lot more involved than purchasing a new car. At least it was for us. So we're going to share our whole process from finding our rig all the way to putting it in storage and everything in between. And we're going to share with you kind of the little bumps along the road that we encountered. So hopefully your process will go smoother, or at least give you things to think about. Now every purchase process is different. So this is just our experience and what we went through. Yours may be totally different, and that's okay. But we thought we'd share, and hopefully some of this you'll find useful in your own purchase process. Now, I broke this video up into 13 steps, so if you're just interested in a couple of the steps and not others, you can look in the description below. There will be links within a timeline on the video if you just want to skip ahead or skip right to a particular item. So look in the description below for that. So step 1 is ordering an EKKO. So this process started way back in January of 2022. At that point, we had decided that the EKKO was going to be our next rig. It's what we wanted. It checked off a lot of boxes for us. And so we found a local dealer, a local RV dealer that had them, and we went for a test drive. And a week later, we signed a purchase agreement and put an order in for the options that we wanted. Now, the purchase agreement we signed, it was a refundable deposit, but our final price was not fixed. So there was a chance that the price could go up by the time the order came through. So this was January. At the time, they were looking like the delivers might be August or September, which was actually before we would get back from our season 4 travels up to Alaska. But we checked with the dealer, and they said if it comes in before you get back, they'll gladly hold it for us until we got back. So everything was cool there. Step 2 is finding an available rig. So fast forward to about August or September. We've been waiting patiently, but there was various delays and back orders and supply issues and the recall, and so things kept getting pushed out. And about the August-September time frame, our dealer was saying, oh, it looks like our order won't be coming in until March or later. Well, our season 5 plans had us leaving home March 1st. And switching rigs once we were already on the road just wasn't something we wanted to experience, because it just sounded like a nightmare. So we started looking around for other options. And we happened to come across a Facebook group that was posting available rigs. Some dealers were posting on there when they had a canceled order. And so it was October when we found one that it wasn't all the options that we had ordered, but it was close enough and options we were willing to accept. So we jumped on it. Now, this was a Facebook post. So we contacted the person who put the post up there. They gave us the name of the salesperson at La Mesa RV Center in West Sacramento and gave us a phone number. But this was a Facebook group. So we wanted to make sure before we handed over any money that this really was a legitimate salesperson at La Mesa. So instead of calling the number that the person gave us, we actually went online. First we did a Google search on the salesperson's name, and the only thing that came up was a LinkedIn profile of the person, and it did say they were a salesperson at La Mesa, so that checked out. But that still wasn't enough for us to feel comfortable. So we went to La Mesa's website, and we actually called the main sales number in West Sacramento and asked for the salesperson from their main sales number, and they transferred us over right away. So, okay, at this point we felt like we were really talking to a legitimate salesperson at La Mesa. So we got all the paperwork, and kind of to make things more complicated, we weren't back from our Alaska trip yet. We were actually in Custer State Park up in Wyoming. And so we had found a place where we got a good cell signal and parked for a little while. And we were exchanging paperwork back and forth. We were able to use Keith's iPad, and there's a markup app. So we were able to fill out PDF forms, copy things, send them back and forth, and actually has a iPencil. So we were able to sign documents, and we got everything taken care of, got them a credit card for a deposit. And within like 2.5 hours from the Facebook posting, we actually had our deposit and ready to purchase this thing. Step 3 is arranging financing. For us, we had all the funds available. There were some investments we needed to sell, but we needed to get all the money transferred into our checking account so we could get a cashier's check written on that account for the amount of the purchase. So luckily, when we were first closed the deal with La Mesa, they wanted us to pick it up within a couple days. While we explained the situation, we were 3 days away from getting back home, and then we needed to get everything turned around and arranged and drive. So our plan was to drive our camper van out to California, pick up the RV, and then drive both of them back. So we managed to push it out. We closed the deal Thursday evening, and we were able to push out our delivery till Friday morning, a week later. So that gave us not a lot of time, actually. So we were still on the road for 3 days, like I said. That was Thursday night. We got home Sunday. But on Friday, I started trying to transfer the funds, and I thought this would go smoothly, but it didn't actually. Even though we had all the funds ready to go, it was spread across several different financial institutions, and I had them all already set up and hooked into the checking account that I wanted to transfer the money into. So I thought, it's just, this is Friday. We've got a whole week we need to get the cashier's check on Wednesday morning. So we had quite a few days to get the transfer to happen. So I thought we had plenty of time. Well, as I started to transfer it on Friday, turns out that a lot of them had maximum limits on how much you could transfer per day. And I even called them and talked to them. I was like, well, you can come into our branch. Well, we weren't within 500 miles of a branch, so that wasn't going to happen. So I transferred what I could on Friday, set up a transfer for Monday, and set up another transfer on Tuesday. And I needed everything cleared by Wednesday morning so we could get a cashier's check. So Monday morning, after we were back home, went into our local bank and tried to see what some other options were in case those funds didn't show up in time. So we initially tried to set up a line of credit for what I thought would be the difference of what we were going to be missing. That we couldn't get that turned around in time. And then the other option that the bank came up with is they had an affiliated branch out in Sacramento that we could get a cashier's check written on Friday. Unfortunately, our appointment with La Mesa was Friday early in the morning before the banks opened, but we're pretty sure La Mesa would have agreed to have us delay that an hour or two until the banks open and get a cashier's check written. But it turned out everything showed up by Wednesday morning, so we didn't have to go that backup route. But just keep that in mind. Sometimes you think you have all the money and ready to go, and then trying to get everything coordinated, a week almost wasn't long enough. Step 4 is arranging insurance. So this went actually pretty smoothly. In order to complete the sale, they wanted proof of insurance for one, so we needed to show up with that. Plus, we were driving it back, so I wanted to make sure we were covered on the way back. So this was real simple. We contacted our agent, had the EKKO added to our insurance policy. They emailed us a temporary card to go take with us. Unfortunately, we couldn't print it out at home because our printer wasn't working. But we had the soft copy with us, and that turned out to be fine. La Mesa was able to print it and get all the paperwork squared away once we got there. So that went pretty smoothly. Step 5 is preparing for the trip to go out and pick up the EKKO. So this was a quick turnaround for us. Like I said, we were still on the road from season 4. We showed up Sunday. We, unloaded, partially unloaded from the van of what we didn't need to take to California with us, did laundry. And then there were some items we purchased to make our trip back. For one, we needed new bedding because our van that we were coming from was a queen size bed. The EKKO has 2 twins. Well, they're actually more of a cot size, but we bought 2 sets of twin sheets and comforter. So we would have that because we wanted to stay in the EKKO on the way back as our shakedown trip. So we did that. We actually had ordered an Americanizer. I don't know if you're not familiar with that. That's something James at Fit RV designed and is selling. It's an adapter that goes on the toilet cassette, so you can hook it up to the sewer hose or the gray water hose that the EKKO comes with, and makes it easier to dump into an RV Santa dump. So we had that. There were a couple of other items. We actually bought a little dustbuster. Not really a necessity, but we have a lot more living space in the EKKO than we do the van. And in the van we just use a little hand broom, but we thought a little vacuum dustbuster would be more convenient. 2 more items that we picked up was a TPMS system. Even though the Ford does come with a TPMS, we kind of like the aftermarket ones. They're a little more informative and a little more sensitive. We can control them a little better. But we actually didn't install that until after we got back. But we did purchase that ahead of time. The other thing that we wanted to make sure we had with us was a surge protector. So this is when we hook up in campgrounds, we want to make sure that we're protecting our rig. We didn't have one in our van because our van is a 20 amp and we could not find a surge protector for 20 amp. They only usually make them, when they're talking about RVs, they're making them for 30 amp or 50 amp, but 20 amp isn't very common. So we purchased that as well. And then there were a few items we picked up once we got to California. One was RV toilet paper. Since we didn't have a toilet in our van, we hadn't been purchasing RV toilet paper, but that's something you want to use in an RV toilet because it breaks down much easier than regular toilet paper and doesn't get, so you don't get it all stuck in your RV plumbing. So that's kind of a necessity. We also bought some chemicals to put in the toilet and rubber gloves because now we have a gray water tank and a cassette toilet to empty, so we wanted gloves to wear when we're dumping those items. Another couple items that we did just to help prepare, we downloaded some of the manuals like the Ford Transit manual and the EKKO manual, familiarized ourselves with that. We also loaded up the Ford Pass app in our phones along with the Lithionics app, which is the batteries that the EKKO uses, so you can monitor that from your phone. And then we also familiarized ourselves with this delivery checklist that someone on the Facebook group had put together, and then another person on the group had put it into what's called a Glide app. So it actually makes a nice little checklist that you can check off as you go. And so we familiarized ourselves with that, and that was very extensive and very helpful for when we did our own inspection on the rig once we got out to California. And then going along with that checklist, where there's some items we took with us to help us inspect the rig once we got our hands on it. So let me look at my list so I don't forget anything. So it was just simple things like a pen and notebook, a list of questions, a tape measure. We took with us a 12 volt tester, a 120 volt tester, some dot stickers. We actually didn't use those. We thought we'd use them to, mark off outlets that we'd checked off or tested out. We brought a thermometer so we could tell if the refrigerators were working and be able to check the temperature of the refrigerator and the freezer. The last couple items was a phone charging cable, so we could check out some of the USB ports. and a multimeter we brought with us as well. So then we loaded all of our stuff back into the van and got on the road Wednesday morning after we picked up our cashier's check. Now we made one campground reservation for on the way out, so about halfway out we set up a campsite for us to stay at in our camper van. And then when we got to West Sacramento, La Mesa agreed to let us stay overnight in their parking lot. So I understand that this is very common among RV dealers to let people stay in their lots when they're picking up a new rig or when they're having service done. So check with your dealer if that's a possibility. Now that being said, we tried to camp rather stealthily because we weren't sure what the local ordinances are or whether the police might suspect something if they're driving by, and we really didn't want to have a knock on the door at 2 a.m. So we kind of put up all our shades. We tried to be quiet and not have much light exposed outside. So tried to be a little stealth there that night. But what was nice, we actually showed up Thursday evening before the dealer had closed, so we went in and double checked to make sure we had permission to stay there overnight. Step 6 is the delivery checklist. So this was the app I was mentioning before. Very extensive, went through every single item on the rig, make sure everything's there, make sure everything's working. So that was just a lifesaver for us. When we first got there Friday morning, they walked us through the rig, kind of showing us everything. That took maybe half an hour. And then we spent 4 hours doing our own inspection. And La Mesa was really good about this. They kind of left us alone, come back and check on us every now and then, make sure everything was going okay and if we needed anything. And that's the way an RV dealer should be. If you get pushback from an RV dealer about how long you're taking inspecting it, it's going, oh, we already inspected. No, an RV dealer should let you this is a huge purchase. They should let you inspect it before you sign the papers. And they shouldn't pressure you on how long you're taking. So, yeah, just be warned, it took us about 4 hours to go through everything, to go through that checklist and be thorough. And there was a few things we found. So let me, again, look at my notes of what we found. So there was the propane quick connect hose was missing from the outdoor kitchen. So they quickly rounded that up for us. And then when we put the awning out and then opened the entry door, it was rubbing against the awning. So they brought a technician over and they readjusted the awning so that worked properly. And then we had a cabinet door back in the bedroom, and I'll show a picture of that here, where there was some delamination. We still don't have that fixed yet, but they wrote up a order for that. They were going to replace it, so it's going to be shipped to our house. So we have documentation that they promised us that replacement door. Oh, the other thing was, we were at first having troubles with the locks on the exterior compartment doors, because we were testing both the keys they gave us and all the locks, and we were struggling with that, and we at the time thought, oh, it's just those locks are just being a little stiff and they'll loosen up over time. But we did get both keys to work, and we did got all of the locks to lock and unlock. And then in the refrigerator, there's adjustable shelves. Well, some of them had screws that secured them in there, and some of them didn't. But between ourselves and La Mesa, we determined that those screws were just for transportation and delivery to make sure they didn't fall out of place or something. But it doesn't make sense to leave the screws in there because they're adjustable. It'd be hard to adjust a shelf if you have to take a screw out to adjust it. So we removed those screws. Now, most of this inspection took place inside. They actually had us connected into power for us. They had all our tanks full, their water full and our propane tanks full. Our gas tank was about 3/4 full, which was good because we were going to be camping it on the way back. But it also allowed us to test everything. So you might want to check with your dealer to make sure that gets all set up ahead of time. And then before our inspection was done, we disconnected from the power. We had them drive it outside so we could test the solar panels and also take it for a little test drive just to make sure everything was working fine. Step 7 was finalizing the sale. So we went through all the paperwork. They had the sales contract or purchase contract. It showed how much we had paid in California sales tax. There was also like a temporary permit that they put in the windshield for us that allowed us to drive the vehicle for 90 days. That was issued by California. And then there was the documentation, like I said, that they were going to order the door for us and have it shipped to us. And there was also another document that had the odometer reading of when the sale was made. And then they said the title documents, it'd take about a week for them to process everything, and then the title documents should be sent out soon after that. And that would be mailed back to our house in Colorado. Step 8 is the shakedown trip on our way back to Colorado. So instead of doing it in 2 days like we did on the way out, we actually took 3 days of driving to get back. We wanted to give ourselves plenty of time to check out everything and make sure all the systems were truly functioning, even though we had done a pretty thorough inspection. So, and the first night we only went about 30 minutes from La Mesa and spent the night at a casino parking lot, which actually turned out to be rather convenient because we could put both of our vehicles right next to each other, transfer all the stuff over to the EKKO that we needed, and that worked out pretty well. Our only regret is we didn't have electrical hookups there, and that was the only night or day that was warm enough that we could have run the air conditioner for an extended period of time. So since we needed hookups to do that, we weren't able to do that. But we were able to open up all the windows and take advantage of that nice cross ventilation that the EKKO has, so we were able to test that out. So on the way back, we tested just about everything. We cooked a meal on the stovetop. We took showers. We used the microwave. We had stuff in the refrigerator and freezer. We did ice cream test in the freezer. Make sure the ice cream stayed solid. Well, at least it did for 2 days, but we ate it all in within 2 days, so we couldn't tell you if it lasts longer than that. But it was keeping it nice and hard and solid, which was something that didn't happen in our little tiny freezer in our camper van. So, we slept in it. We tried different options of putting the shades and screens up and down, opening the windows, cracking the windows, because there's a way you can just have it open partially. And just all things like that, and just how everything worked together. Use the toilet. We actually dumped the toilet cassette once just to see how everything worked there. And we didn't hook up the first 2 nights, but the third night we did hook up to electric, make sure all that was working properly. Now we did encounter one issue on the way back. Within a day of picking up the rig, the inverter turned off and we couldn't get it to turn back on via the console up here. We actually had to do a little searching on the Facebook group to figure out the answers. So what it turned out to be is the inverter has a timeout. So if it detects that power is not used for 25 hours, it'll shut itself off. And then we weren't able to turn it on by the control panel because evidently the inverter switch wasn't set properly. There's 2 ways on the power button on the actual inverter, which in our EKKO is underneath the bench seat here in the dinette. On earlier models, it's down in the compartment with the batteries. But in here, it's underneath the seat, so we had to pull the seat up and get to that. And there's a button. If it's all the way in, it's on. If it's sticking, I think I don't know, look it up in the manual. But if it needs to be in standby mode, which I think is when the button's pushed out in order to be able to control it from the control panel. So we were able to get that turned back on. And so we went in and checked the settings because we decided, well, let's turn that timeout off. We're still not sure why it went off because we were using power. However, when we went through the control panel, we noticed some of the other settings weren't right. It was set to, what do they call it? Let me look that up here. It was set to flood instead of the lithium. Now that was, to be fair, that was on the checklist, but we goofed when we went through the checklist. We actually checked the settings on the solar controller and not the inverter panel. So that was our bad. We should know better, but you know, you're going through hundreds of items. We goofed. So once we got that set, we noticed a couple other values didn't seem right, but when we went back to check them, they had changed, and we're assuming they changed because we'd switched from flood to lithium. So since we had that set up right, all the other values seemed correct at that point. Now we don't know if that's why the timeout tripped, but we still don't have the timeout turned back on yet. Now the advantage of having the timeout is if you have a tendency to leave the inverter on and then you're not using it, there's a drain just from the inverter. So it will put a small drain on your batteries. So it is a good idea to turn that inverter off when you're not using it. Now, if you're good about doing that manually, then that's not an issue. But so the timeout is really kind of a backup. And it's like, oh, if you forget and leave the inverter on, it'll turn itself off. So we may turn that timeout back on. We don't know yet. We'll see. However, also while we were in the inverter controls, we noticed there's a setting. And the setting is, I don't know if there's a name for it, but it's setting 28, whatever that's called. And it has to do with how much amperage the shore power connection will pull. So it's currently set to 30 amps, which is fine when you're plugged into a 30 amp outlet at a campground or 50 amp. But when you're plugged in at home, which may only be like a 15 or 20 amp circuit, you want to lower that value so you aren't trying to draw too much current from a circuit that can't handle that. What was also nice is driving both vehicles back. They're both our van and the EKKO are based on a Ford Transit, and they're different year models, they're different types engines. Our van was not an EcoBoost, the EKKO is. So it was a nice comparison. We'd switch off drivers, so we get to go back and forth between the two, and we could really notice the difference. The EKKO had a lot more power going up the hills with that EcoBoost. It just seemed to handle better, and I'm not quite sure what that is because it's longer and heavier. It just seemed to handle nicer than our camper van. So that was really nice to get that comparison. Now this was mid-October, and temperatures were getting cold. So we were concerned about things freezing. So the EKKO is a 4-season vehicle. The water compartment and the gear garage, they're all heated spaces. However, they're only heated when you're stationary and you have the furnace running. They are not heated when you're driving down the road. So you have to be careful. The second morning, we actually made sure we ran the water heater in comfort mode instead of eco mode to make sure there was hot water in all the lines. Comfort mode circulates the water through the pipes at a higher temperature than eco mode does. So we wanted to make sure all those pipes were nice and warm before we got started for a drive that day. On the last day, we knew temperatures were going to be at around freezing for most of the day on our drive back. So as an extra precaution, we actually drained the water heater. Since it was our last day of driving, we weren't camping in it again that night. So we drained the water heater before we left that morning of the last day, just to make sure we didn't have anything freeze up on us getting back. Step 9 is winterization. So as I said, temperatures were getting colder. So when we got back, we needed to get not only the EKKO winterized, but also our camper van winterized, so we didn't have any damage due to freezing pipes. Because if you let water in those lines freeze, you're going to be getting leaks in your water lines. Now, we thought this was going to be a lot easier than it was. Because in the camper van, our water system over there is much simpler. Plus it's all exposed. We can see it all. And we don't normally blow out the system. We just add antifreeze. So normally winterization of an RV involves one or two items. One is to blow all the water out of the system using air pressure. And the second is to put RV antifreeze fluid in all your lines and tanks. Now, RV antifreeze is different than automotive antifreeze. RV antifreeze is non-toxic, so it's safe to use in systems intended for drinking water. So that's why you make sure you use RV antifreeze. It's the pink stuff because it's non-toxic. And Winnebago, it sounds like they're still trying to work out the minor details of the procedure. So there was one in the owner's manual, but we actually went online because it seemed like there was a newer revision on the manual online, so we actually followed that. They actually say the blowout procedure is optional, but the antifreeze, adding the antifreeze is mandatory, but they recommended doing both. So we actually did both. Now we had a little issue blowing out the system. I believe the valves on the drain pipes don't quite make a good enough seal or something, and so we struggled with getting the system to pressurize when we were doing the air pressure. Now you're not doing a whole lot of air pressure. I think it's like 30 psi or less, so it's not a lot of pressure, but it wasn't holding. We could feel air leaking out of the drain pipes and the water wasn't being forced out of the other openings. We had looked on the Facebook group and some people had talked about putting a clamp over one of the drain pipes. The actual drain pipe we were having an issue with was actually different than the one they had put a clamp on, but we didn't want to use a clamp. That seemed a little, I don't know, it seemed like it might damage the drain line, so we just put tape. I think we used duct tape or something, Gorilla Tape, over the bottom of the drain pipe, and that seemed to seal it up enough that we could get the pressure through the system and get stuff to blow out. Now, if you look at all the steps, we actually had trouble following all the steps. I think there's like 50 steps altogether if you do both procedures, which is a lot of steps. And we were doing a soft copy and it's 2 columns and the whole page didn't fit on our screen, and we actually ended up accidentally skipping a step every now and then realize our mistake and have to go back and correct it. So I think next time we do that, we'll actually either write it down, list it out, or use some kind of checklist system so we can check things off as we go, because it's a lot of steps. The other thing that you might want to think about is we still had quite a bit of fresh water in our tank when we were starting this procedure. We didn't just want to drain that out in the street in front of our house. So we actually put a bucket underneath the drain, caught most of it, and watered the trees in our yard. So we kind of got a double bonus there. But it was a lot of trips with the bucket. Now the other thing is, part of the procedure kind of near the end is you need to then dump your gray water tank and your cassette toilet. And now the toilet cassette you could empty in your toilet in your house, so that's not a big issue. But the gray tank, you probably need to go find an RV dump somewhere. Luckily in our town at the waste treatment center, they have an RV dump. They require you to get a permit and key card to go use it, but for residents it's free. So when you get to do your winterization, or you're getting ready to, you might want to check around your area to see where you can dump locally and get that taken care of before you get started and go, oh, where do I go now? Step 10 is title and registration. We thought since we'd been through this procedure once before with the camper van, and we bought that out of state, that we knew the ropes and knew how things were going to go. Well, we were wrong. It turned out to be a little more complicated, and we ran into quite a few issues. So we actually waited the week, and I think it was about, 8 or 9 days, and the title information from La Mesa or California DMV came through and showed up at our house. So that included the 2 certificates of origin. One for the Ford chassis, from cutaway chassis from Ford, and the other one is the rest of the RV from Winnebago. So Winnebago is an auto manufacturer, because the Ford cutaway chassis is not a complete vehicle, and the general public just can't buy a cutaway chassis. So that's why there's 2 certificates of origin, and they're considered a manufacturer. So we had those, and we knew from our camper van that we had to go have a VIN verification. So we printed off that form, went over to our Ford dealer, had them verify the VIN and fill out that paperwork. And then we made an appointment for our local DMV. So we went in there with our checkbook, all our paperwork. We thought, great, well, you get this all done, we'll come back out with plates. No. Turned out we were missing a couple things. One, they wanted to have a documented or verification from the dealer of what the MSRP was, and 2 was I needed a certified weight of the vehicle. And that's particular to Colorado. I don't know if other states are the same. In Colorado, we have what's called an ownership tax. And the ownership tax is not based on the purchase price, but it's based on the MSRP. So that's why they wanted the MSRP. And the weight is the registration fees are based on the weight of the vehicle. So we had to go get a certified weight. So they gave us a list of where to go get it weighed. So we did that. We contacted La Mesa for a statement of facts signed by them for what the MSRP is. For some reason we had trouble getting that from La Mesa. I'm not quite sure what happened there. We did get a statement, but it wasn't signed. But anyway, so we got the certified weight and that statement, and we went back to the DMV for the second time. And they reluctantly accepted the MSRP. But then they look, oh, you have more than 1,500 miles on this vehicle when you purchased it. In Colorado, we consider that a used vehicle, which means we cannot accept the certificates of origin. The dealer needs to put the vehicle in a title, get a title in their name back in California. So we're like, oh, great. But then we got back home from that appointment, and then we're thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense, because most RVs are driven from the factory to the dealer, which means many times they have more than 1,500 miles on it. So does that mean Colorado, you can't purchase an RV as a new vehicle? It's always a used vehicle. So we did a little research online, and the way the Colorado rules state is it's 1,500 miles or 1,500 demonstration miles. And I'm like, well, this wasn't a demo vehicle. It was just transported to the dealer. So we went back to the DMV. Of course, it was a holiday and then the weekend, and so it was quite a few days. We're back at the DMV and asking questions, and they're like, okay, if you can have documented proof of what the transportation miles are, we'll accept that instead of a title. So and in the meantime, they had, at the second appointment, they already gave us another temporary tag for a vehicle to make sure we can get everything taken care of. And then we contacted La Mesa, and they're like, okay, overnight they sent us a FedEx slip to overnight the certificates of origin back to them. They'll go get a title. So they got the documents overnighted. They got them the next day. They said, yes, we got them. We went and got a title issued in your name, so not their name, which I assume California required because they no longer owned the vehicle. We did. So they got put the paperwork in for the California title, and that'll get mailed to us, some time later. It was basically in California DMV's hands at that point. And La Mesa did give us a signed statement of facts over the MSRP. So that they turned that around really fast for us. So that was really nice. So then about a week later, we get this California registration documentation in the mail that said our vehicle was now registered in California, but it was some weird type of registration where it was non-operable. So I don't know what that all meant, but I assume they had to do that because they were issuing a title. And then it was about a week or so later, the title did actually show up at our house. So we made our 4th appointment with the Colorado DMV, took that in, got our, so we had the California title, we had everything. They said, okay, great. Now, just to complicate things a little bit, we actually wanted to do what's called a specialized license and a personalized license. So this specialized, we wanted these Rocky Mountain National Park plates, and we had already done that. We'd already made a donation and to make that happen. So we had that certificate, and then we wanted them personalized as well. So we thought the way the procedure was is they were going to issue us plates on the spot, and then we'd have to wait for the personalized plates later. Well, it turned out they didn't have any Rocky Mountain National plates made up, so they were going to have to wait on those anyway. So they just took care of everything all at once. They issued us yet another temporary plate, and then we'll get the Rocky Mountain National Park plate personalized in the mail a month or so later. So we're actually still waiting for that to show up. That should show up any day now. Step 11, warranty items. Now, I mentioned during our inspection we found the cabinet door that we're having replaced. So that was, I guess, in essence, you could call that a warranty item. Since then, since we've taken possession of the EKKO, we've found a few other just minor items. And so just a little while ago, we contacted La Mesa first to check on the status of the delivery of the door. So that hasn't come in yet. We're still waiting on that. And we asked them, who should we be contacting about warranty items? And so they actually referred us to go out to Winnebago's customer care and contact them, and they'll let us know how to proceed from there. So we actually sent an email off to their customer care listing the items that we had found and what we should do. Now, one was on the one bed platform. It's a little bit warped, so it's not sitting quite flat. The other item is, when I talked about the locks, what we thought were just being stiff, it turns out that we actually have 2 different sets of locks. So all the exterior compartment doors, they should all be keyed the same. Well, except for the cassette toilet. Don't ask me why that one's different. That's a totally different lock. But all the rest of them should be keyed the same. It turns out the one driver's side door on the end of the gear garage is different from all the other ones. So one of our keys works that one, and the other key works all the other ones. So we want to get that rekeyed so they are all the same. Another item was, we noticed when we looked on the roof, there's a lot of wires coming from the solar panels, and they just seem like they're laying up there on the roof, and they don't really seem very secure. So we don't know if that's how they should be, or they should be secured better than that. So that's a question we have out to Winnebago. Another one is this microwave door, and we know a lot of people have had issues with it. It seems like, it was working fine at first, but now when we push the button, the door doesn't actually open. You can hear the latch release, but the door is not opening. So we actually put a little suction cup we had, I forget what the suction cup was from, just so we can have, so if we release it and then we can actually pull it open, because there's no handle to pull it. So either that needs some kind of adjustment or it needs to be replaced. And then the final item is on the battery compartment door that just doesn't seem to close real flush. It seems to like stick out some, and so we're concerned that that's not a real watertight seal on there. So we want that checked out as well. Step 12 is modifications and organization. So we've been busy these past couple months trying to get this rig ready for us. We're hitting the road March 1st, which isn't that far away, so before we put it into storage, we want to make sure we're ready to hit the road, because we're going to be on the road for 7.5 months this season. Now, normally I would recommend someone who is new to RV life or has a new rig that they actually spend some time camping in it first and using it before they make any major modifications and try to figure out where everything goes, because you may have a vision in your mind about how you're going to use the rig and it doesn't always match how you're actually going to use it. You may find things are a lot different once you actually start experiencing it. But this is coming up on our 5th season of traveling about half the year. So we're pretty sure we know what we want. We actually have a spreadsheet that lists all the gear that we take with us, so we know what we want with us. So we've made a lot of modifications. We've actually test fitted a lot of our gear to make sure it'll fit where we want it to go. And that's the one thing that really seems different in the EKKO from our camper van. So even though our camper van is a little smaller of a vehicle than the EKKO, it seemed like we had more storage in it because it was not chopped up as much. It's a more continuous space. Plus our camper van had a much smaller living area, so we have much more living space in this, so what we gave up was some of the storage. So it's been a little trickier trying to get everything to fit where we want it to, so that's kind of where a lot of the mods came in and a lot of the different organization items that we purchased. And then there was just stuff that we knew we wanted to do. So we're actually going to do separate videos on our modifications, our organization, and all the new gear that we bought, because this is probably the most preparation we've done for a season since we started this 4 years ago. Step 13 is storage. So in storage, I mean RV storage, not what we store in the RV. So even before we left for California to pick this up, we arranged for a spot in an RV storage lot. And that's because the EKKO is a little larger than our camper van and it doesn't fit on our driveway. So we really can't keep it parked at our house. So we need to go put it in storage. So in order to make sure that a spot was available, we found a place we liked. It is an outdoor storage spot. It's not indoor. This facility does have some indoor spaces and some covered spaces. Of course, they're priced accordingly as well. It's not all that cheap, but not too bad. So we don't know if we'll switch to a more protected space or not. There was none available at the time, so we just have a secured spot in the open area. Now, since we didn't have our EKKO when we initially rented the space, we actually had to register our camper van for it because they wanted a vehicle associated with it. So when we got the EKKO and got the registration, we switched it over from our camper van to the EKKO once we got that settled down. So that's pretty much the whole process that we went through. Hopefully you found some of this information useful or entertaining at least. So now we feel we are ready for season 5. So hopefully things will go smoothly. We just get our EKKO out of storage and load it up and hit the road. So thanks for watching. And if you want more details, you can look in the description below. There's a link to our related blog post, so check that out. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Ta-ta for now.